This previously uploaded video now includes our 2024 winter testing. If this is your first time watching, welcome and please enjoy. If you're returning for our winter test results, you can use the chapters feature to jump straight to that section right after our road, wet, and dry results summary. Highway all-season tires.
Highway all-season tires.
Kind of the daily commuter tire for a lot of trucks and SUVs.
Yeah, for the majority of truck owners who spend the majority of their miles on the road, they don't need the compromises that come with an aggressive all-terrain tire. A highway all-season really fits the bill.
Yeah, and that's not to say they're exclusively just for on-pavement work. But you won't find them on any kind of serious off-road buggy or any kind of person's vehicle that deals with a lot of difficult terrain.
Yeah, that's very true. And also, this is an exciting test because it's our first truck tire test on Tire Rack's first ever dedicated truck tire testing platform.
Yep, it's a 2025 Toyota Tacoma. It's actually a recent redesign from Toyota, and it replaced a long-standing generation that was beloved by all. And it's orange.
It is very orange. And highway all-season tires are kind of just right for what most people would do with a truck like this. And we've assembled a group of 9 of the best competitors in the marketplace from some of the biggest brands out there. We have new products. The General Grabber HT is brand new this season. The Michelin Defender LTX MS2, it's been out for a little over a year at this point, but we've never featured it in a full comparison test, right? Crazy. And another exciting little thing, we have 2 Goodyear Wrangler products in the same test. Yes, the Goodyear twins. They seem to be, positioned kind of similarly out there. So we're gonna figure out how the two differ.
Yeah, but as always, our first order of business is road rides. And that's an important part of this test because highway all-season tire drivers are not gonna put up with a lot of pattern noise or a harsh ride.
Right, so we're gonna get out there, we're gonna figure out which tires deliver, the requisite comfort, and we'll see if any of them kind of fall short. Bridgestone Dueler LX. It smooths over little baby bumps. It rounds over big bumps. It feels like a great combination of comfort. It's very cushioned.
I want to talk about noise because that's another high point for me. It is smooth and quiet. Develops a little bit of a very consistent roar on the cross-cut concrete, but on the smoother surfaces, where there's not a lot for that tread pattern to interact with, it quiets right down. Steering is pretty good too. A lot of it feels very truck-like. Small inputs have small changes.
I agree. The steering was fine for a truck, for this platform. I don't necessarily agree with your small inputs equal small changes because it felt like the tire was always behind my hands.
You need to sit there for a second,
right?
But your small input will eventually
yes, it gave you a small change. Yeah. Continental Terrain Contact HT. Brent, what do you think about the Continental Terrain Contact HT?
Going over these bumps, I can feel more of them. I can feel the road surface. I can feel the little undulations more. It's short of transparent, but it is rather apparent what's going on down there.
It's a little taut.
Heard it here
is
first.
the word that I would use.
Taut. There you go.
It's a little taut,
That's a good word.
What do you think about noise for the Terrain Contact HT?
A little bit more elevated in noise, but it's very consistent.
The steering also is actually really good. It's responsive, it's precise. There's not really much of a delay between what your hands do and when the vehicle reacts. It kind of stands out above the others for its steering response, right?
This is kind of our sportier highway all-season tire.
Right, which is a weird thing to say, but it's you're right, it's true.
Yeah.
Firestone Destination LE3, ride quality. Tell me about it.
We're back on the bridge deck coming down, which is where we have lots of kind of repeating undulations and cracks. It's cushioned, especially the big bumps, but there's that secondary motion, there's that jiggle afterward.
It lacks some composure. Even though it is softer than most of the other tires in the test, you still get more total movement because there is this repeated residual motion after the fact. Let's talk about noise. It's actually a high point for this tire.
It is.
Yep.
Glad you said that.
I'm impressed with the noise. It just does a good job of subduing everything, making it so that nothing really distinctive stands out. It just kind of blends everything together well to just kind of broad, generic sound, noise.
Perhaps not the high point of this tire. Is the steering. It takes a lot of input to get a response.
You add, and then it's like, oh, okay, now we're gonna go. And you notice it on the on-ramp, on the off-ramp. It's like, I am adding multiple degrees more steering input than on any other tire to just navigate, you know. And I'm sure you would get used to it if this is what you drove every day, but you know, driving all these products back to back throws it into that contrast, right?
Yeah, like say between the Continental and this, it's just like, those are two very different handling tires. Yeah. All right, we're back out on the General Grabber HT. So a new release from General.
That's right.
Highway all season. What do you think about the steering now that we're on the on-ramp?
Since I'm steering right now, I actually think it's really good. It's pretty precise. It responds as I want it to.
It's especially nice at the higher speeds, like the on-ramp, like the loaded portions. I'd like a little more kind of at the lower kind of city speeds, 90-degree turns, but again, it is good, especially in this test.
Right.
On to noise, there's a little bit of resonance on the concrete, nothing bad, but I just feel like it's a slightly elevated level compared to some other tires in this test.
Yep.
In ride, we're on this kind of good but slightly broken asphalt here. I think I said it's a good mix of comfort and control. Like, it feels nice for this chassis.
It does.
Which we realize everyone's not always driving a Tacoma, but I think this would translate to a lot of trucks and full-size SUVs really well. Yeah.
Goodyear Wrangler Steadfast HT. And this is kind of fun because we have a sort of an inter-brand comparison here. Goodyear has two products in this space. They have the Wrangler Steadfast HT and they have the Wrangler Workhorse HT. And people may wonder, you know.
People? Me?
Everybody may wonder, you're people, you
Yeah.
count. What is the difference between these two, you know?
It's great.
Right?
The ride is pretty darn good. The right amount of cushion and conciseness, which is probably a word.
Ride quality is quite good. It is as good as anything else in this test. What about noise?
Noise is good. It doesn't really call a lot of attention to itself. It's just there. It's never intrusive. Very consistent tones.
Whatever noise it does create, like, really fades to the background. It's kind of there, present, just background noise.
How about that steering as you do an aggressive lane change to the right?
Here I go, look at me!
That wasn't nearly aggressive enough, but okay, there we are.
It was
What do you think of
plenty
that? How'd that
aggressive for
feel?
public roads.
Walk me through it.
I called it very one-to-one in that the input that you give, you get a directly proportionate response or a directly proportional response. You get the exact amount of response that you expect.
Right.
It's natural. It just gives me what I want.
Easy to drive. It's predictable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
It's good.
yeah.
Yeah. This is the second half of the Goodyear duo, the Wrangler Workhorse HT. I noticed that the ride is still good. There's a little bit more motion.
Yeah, I don't think it's scoreable. I don't think it is quite as cushioned or controlled, but like you said, it's close. A little bit more multi-tone. I hear like just the hint of kind of competing tones where we didn't hear that with the Wrangler Steadfast HT.
And slightly higher volume too,
Yes.
in my opinion. It had those things. It had more variety of tones, and everything was elevated just a little bit.
Yeah.
The steering and on-road handling was another thing that was different,
was
but not
noticeable.
scoreable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It didn't respond quite as quickly as, again, we're comparing it to its Steadfast counterpart, but also some of the other tires in the test. Other than that, though, it was still quite nice. Like I said, it wasn't even a big enough difference for me to
Mine
drop
was.
its
It just got into the scoreable difference.
Oh, did you?
there.
Okay,
Yeah.
you gave it a half point.
Yeah,
So in the
yeah.
test report, you'll see a quarter-point difference between this and the other because we had a slight disagreement, which is okay. Kumo Krujin HT51. I am a little underwhelmed, I have to admit.
Not dramatically. It's just it's one of the few times where I think we've both been kind of critical of every single aspect of its road performance.
We got the most total motion out of this tire, and I don't know if it's because it's just stiffer than everything else or if it's pretty stiff combined with some residual motion.
Noise, kind of similar thing. It's fine. Again, it's not
fine.
bad.
It's fine. Like, we're gonna say that a lot about this tire. We've already said that a lot about this tire. It's fine.
fine.
There's a little bit more total volume. There's a little bit more variety in the tones.
And your steering was a scoreable difference, right?
Also,
Yeah.
yes.
Again, I was kind of on the fence, but yeah, it does feel just a little bit slower than some of the better tires in the test. It's been average at everything so far on the road. As a whole, that kind of stands out.
Right. And it's not that we're saying it's a bad tire, but it doesn't stand out as good or great compared to the rest of the competitive set. This is the Michelin Defender LTX MS2. And interestingly, we've never tested this tire in a head-to-head test before. The ride is composed, it's controlled, it's a little bit taut.
It's a little stiff, yeah.
Right? Yeah, you feel all the bumps. It doesn't eliminate any of the small stuff. It doesn't do a great job of rounding over the big stuff. What do you think about noise?
Some of the best in the test.
Right?
It's not better than some of the other high-scoring tires in this test, but hey, it's very good.
Steering and on-road handling, what do you think about that?
You know, for a highway all-season tire, it's good.
Yes.
It's good. It's better than fine. It's good. I would still take a little more response to inputs, you know, a little bit of more of a ramp up in resistance. I'd still like a little bit more.
Right.
We've said that a lot about a lot of tires in this test.
We're allowed to have high expectations. Just because it's a highway all-season test, just because it's a truck, doesn't mean that you shouldn't get some kind of satisfaction from the steering.
We found that in a couple of
in
these.
a couple tires.
Yeah,
You got
and I still want that.
Fredestein Pinza HT. It's a very well balanced product, right? It's pretty good all around, isn't it?
Yeah, it does everything at a high level. It's not the best at anything, but it's darn close.
I know, right?
It's darn close.
Yeah.
The ride is smooth, concise.
Does a reasonable job of rounding over big bumps and keeping disturbance to the occupants to a minimum.
Noise, same thing. Nothing really
stands out, right? Like that's the thing.
It's quiet when it should be. It's not loud when it shouldn't be.
Right. It just kind of fades into the background. It's not the best in the test, but even that is high praise because there's nothing that's really bad about it.
Steering is good too. It actually has a little bit of response, a little bit of heft when you get into it. It's still fine on center.
Yep.
I still do want a little bit more. Like we said, it's not best at everything, but like you said, a well-balanced performance. Nice job. All right, moving on to some objective testing on the track. And this is an important part of the test for these tires because they were all really close on the road. And they all showed they have what it takes to satisfy when conditions are nice.
Yeah, but that's not always the case. It's not always a bright sunny day and things don't always go according to plan. So our on-track testing shows us both, how much outright traction each tire has in the wet and the dry, and also how each tire responds when pushed in an emergency situation.
Simulating an emergency braking event, each tire was run through multiple 60-0 stops, bringing the truck to a stop in the shortest average distance of 155 feet were the Bridgestone Dueler LX and Goodyear Wrangler Workhorse HT. Right on top of them were the Terrain Contact HT, Grabber HT, and Wrangler Steadfast HT. Starting to show a more meaningful difference in longitudinal grip, the Defender LTX MS2 and Destination LE3 both got the job done in just under 170 feet. That left the Kumo right at the 170 mark, with the Pinza HT rounding out the group at 173 feet. Not only was the Bridgestone's longitudinal grip impressive, but it also delivered the highest lateral traction around the skid pad and rivaled the best in standing water lateral traction. The Continental took the top spot in the standing water at 0.58 Gs and was right behind the Bridgestone around the wet skid pad. The General followed closely behind in both tests, but couldn't quite match the frontrunners. At 0.61 Gs, the Firestone and Michelin felt like a step down in grip, but got the job done on the wet skid pad and in the standing water. The Wrangler Steadfast HT bested the Wrangler Workhorse HT in both lateral traction tests, but both seemed appropriate for the category. At 0.59 Gs, the Kumo and Fredestein got around the skid pad at a good pace, but the deeper standing water seemed to exacerbate their lower lateral traction a bit more. The higher wet traction figures helped the Terrain Contact HT and Dueler LX piece together the quickest laps by a fair margin. Following suit, the Grabber HT was a fraction of a second slower around our course. The Wrangler Steadfast HT, Defender LTX MS2, Destination LE3, and Pinza HT all grouped similarly appropriate times for this category of tire. Struggling for lateral traction, the Wrangler Workhorse HT wasn't helped by its excellent braking, and rounded out the group with the Crugen HT51 struggling in all aspects of wet grip.
Like our previous touring tire tests, in the dry, we're also performing the emergency lane change maneuver alongside our usual lateral traction testing around the skid pad and 60 to 0 mile-an-hour braking distances. We can get a good idea of a tire's capabilities with just lateral traction and braking, but the emergency lane change helps give us an idea of how a tire puts everything together through aggressive transitions with lots of dynamic forces. It's a real-life test for a real-world situation. Through the emergency lane change, the primary trait was understeer, perhaps not surprisingly. What we found were how some tires quickly started to push through the maneuver, and how some maintained their control further into the lane change and came back sooner to make the transition back to the correct lane. The tire's absolute lateral grip didn't seem to be the only factor in the test. The Crugin HT51 managed to deliver its traction in a more progressive manner, which really helped maintain control. The Defender LTX MS2 and Terrain Contact HT both easily passed the maneuver through most attempts. The Dueler LX and Pinza HT both did an admirable job, but pushed beyond what was quickly recoverable about a quarter of the time. The Destination LE3 was where we started to find inconsistencies, and its margin to work in was tighter, with a successful pass only half the time. The Grabber HT seemed to struggle even more, with what felt like slower response to inputs and stubborn understeer a common occurrence. The two Goodyears were also an interesting part of the day, with the Wrangler Workhorse HT making the lane change without much fuss, but its Wrangler Steadfast HT counterpart struggling to complete successfully. With both having similar longitudinal and lateral grip in isolation, the Wrangler Workhorse HT seemed much more adept at putting it to work in dynamic situations in our lane change scenario.
When asked to panic stop in the drive from 60 miles per hour, the Continental and General delivered. Both brought the truck to a halt at 130 feet. The Wrangler Steadfast HT was a mere 1 foot further than the leaders, with its brand mate Wrangler Workhorse HT 2 more beyond that. The Firestone and Bridgestone came in at 134 and 135 feet respectively, which were all good numbers for highway all-season tires. At 138 feet, the Kuma and Vredestein felt at a slight disadvantage, with the Michelin rounding out the group needing 140 feet to stop the truck, still only 10 feet further than the best in the test. Around the skid pad, the Continental once again found the grip, pulling 0.76 Gs in our test vehicle. Right there with it were the Kuma and the Michelin a hundredth of a G behind the leader. Another hundredth back, the Dueler LX and Wrangler Workhorse HT seemed like respectable performers. The bottom half of the group ended up pulling 0.73 Gs, which seemed to understeer more than the others, but were still perfectly appropriate for a highway all-season tire. I think we were both really impressed just how closely this test shook out.
Yeah, it's like we always say, tire design is a lesson in compromise. There are trade-offs, there's give and take. So it's really important that you do the research and figure out which tire emphasizes the things that are highest priority for you.
And it was close, but we did find some differences in the end. So let's break it down in the order we tested.
In our road ride testing, every tire in the test delivered good on-road manners. The Pinza HT and Wrangler Steadfast HT both excelled at delivering the most well-rounded performance and led the tight group. The Defender LTX MS2 and Grabber HT also delivered strong results, with the Terrain Contact HT, Dueler LX, and Wrangler Workhorse HT right behind in the scores.
Wet performance found some more significant differentiation. The Bridgestone topped the subjective evaluations with its capable wet grip and satisfying handling. The Continental and General both performed at a high level and just led the Michelin once the scores were tabulated. After those front runners, the group started to separate a bit. The Wrangler Steadfast HT and Destination LE3 were a moderate step back in wet handling, but still provided decent performance. Beyond that, the rest of the group had more difficulty finding traction or putting it to work.
Once every aspect of performance was calculated, the Continental Terrain Contact HT came out on top. The Bridgestone Dueler LX followed narrowly behind it, along with the Michelin Defender LTX MS2 and General Grabber HT, which were right on its heels. With a bit more differentiation, the Vredestein Pinza HT delivered a balanced performance, along with the Goodyear Wrangler Steadfast HT. Another step back in combined evaluation metrics found the Goodyear Wrangler Workhorse HT, Firestone Destination LE3, and Kumho Crugin HT51 rounding out the group with solid performance that would still certainly satisfy drivers, but couldn't quite match their counterparts once every metric was factored in.
With each of these balanced competitors performing well on the road and in the wet and dry portions of our testing, now we get to see how they cope with difficult winter conditions, to see if some of these tires may be able to differentiate themselves from the group.
Right, so in order to do that, we took them out on the ice at our local skating rink to evaluate acceleration and braking traction. Then we headed north to a dedicated winter testing facility where we evaluated acceleration and braking on packed snow. And in addition to that, we evaluated subjective handling characteristics along with behavior at the limit. The Firestone and Bridgestone managed some of the best traction on the ice, with a majority of the group right behind. While each tire in the test struggled to accelerate on the polished surface, the Goodyear Wrangler Steadfast HT and Kumho Krugen HT51 were a solid step behind the group in both acceleration and braking. We test 0 to 12 mile per hour acceleration and 25 to 0 mile per hour braking in the snow, and we measure both in feet. So we report the distance required to accelerate from a stop to 12 miles an hour and the distance needed to bring the vehicle to rest from 25. This allows us to add both measurements together for a single number that's representative of each tire's straight line traction in the snow. Keeping the Tacoma in two-wheel drive helped minimize the masking effect that all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive can have on acceleration, helping us better realize the tire's true effect on acceleration. The Defender LTX MS2 and Pinza HT both impressively got the truck up to speed in under 40 feet. Another capable group was close behind, feeling appropriate for the category. A palpable step further were the last four tires in the group, whose lower rates of acceleration were somewhat obvious. Braking from 25 miles per hour found significant differences from best to worst. Once again, the Defender LTX MS2 delivered solid braking at 70 feet. A proficient group brought the truck to a halt in under 80 feet, but once again, that's where the rest of the group started struggling, with the two Goodyears and the General needing significantly more space to finally come to a stop.
In an effort to test each tire's characteristics at the limit and evaluate their subjective lateral grip, we utilized a prepared surface that let us incrementally increase speed and steering input to evaluate the tire's reaction once exceeding their maximum level of grip. If you drive in winter conditions, then it's almost assured you'll find the limit of grip. Sometimes, how that tire reacts to the loss of traction can be as important as when, so this evaluation helped us consistently find that limit and exceed it. The Defender LTX MS2, Pinza HT, and Dueler LX proved they not only had the raw traction to get the job done, but also had the poise at the limit of grip for a predictable, easy-to-drive feel even when pushed beyond that limit. While still appropriate for the category, a core group of tires managed suitable dynamics at the limit, even if some were challenged by a lack of grip. The two Goodyears, however, seemed both deficient in grip and vague at the limit, which just made matters worse. So winter performance is the last component to our testing, and it's a big one for drivers who experience winter's worst. We can combine those scores along with the wet, dry, and road score to get a good overall ranking for drivers whose all season includes snow and ice.
Testing on the road and in the wet and dry showed some differentiation between tires, but the results were impressively pretty close. After incorporating winter performance, the results were still close, but the Michelin Defender LTX MS2 came out on top by a decent margin. Not far behind it, and showing a similar capacity to balance four-season performance, the Bridgestone Dueler LX, Continental Terrain Contact HT, and Vredestein Pinza HT followed. The General Grabber HT and Firestone Destination LE3 showed similar balance, albeit at just a slightly lower level of performance. The Kumho Krugen HT51 was only slightly elevated after winter testing, despite being the only all-weather tire in this test, which was disappointing for our team, but is a good reminder that the severe snow service rating is only one aspect of winter capability and not a guarantee of total performance. The two Goodyears, particularly the Wrangler Steadfast HT, didn't seem to prioritize winter grip. Their lackluster winter performance drugged them down, which may be okay for warmer climates, but it goes to show why getting the right tire for the climatic conditions you drive in is so important.
Highway all-season tires are expected to do everything well, and in this test we found some big swings in capability.
Right? There's always a trade-off or a compromise in performance. That's why it's important to do the research and make sure you're selecting the right highway all-season tire for how, where, and what you drive. We've really enjoyed putting this video together and hope you enjoyed the test as well. Be on the lookout for more in the future, and until then, as always, thanks for watching.